If you want to read this article, you can do that at justinstellman.com/A16. How to avoid attracting negative karma. Recently, I read a book called The Seat of the Soul by Gary Zukav. Every now and again, you read a book that really changes how you think. You might read a lot of great books that you really enjoy, but even though they're amazing, they don't actually change your life. I first attempted to read The Seat of the Soul back in 2002 when I was traveling around the world for a year. I remember it distinctly. I'd just gotten off a bus in the city of Rotorua in the North Island of New Zealand. I'd finished my previous book, and when I got to the crowded youth hostel, I had my own room, but I was utterly exhausted. I went to go get some food for the evening, and when I came back, while I attempted to eat dinner, I picked up this book and tried to read it. But the concepts never really jumped off the page. I found it boring. Even though I was really into the ideas of the book in general, I never connected with any of the higher concepts contained within it. I really wanted to like the book, but I just didn't. It was one of those books that if you lose your concentration while you're reading and you get to the end of the page, you have no idea what you just read. Perhaps I just wasn't ready for that much truth. Perhaps I wasn't prepared for the kind of with what that truth would do to me. Perhaps I needed to learn specific lessons and have certain challenges happen in my life in order to fully connect to the ideas that are contained in that book. We don't know why something might have to come around again in our lives for a second time. All we can do is create a story that somehow answers the why of any situation in a way that empowers us rather than disempowers us. In The Seat of the Soul, Gary Zukav has a whole chapter about karma. So what is karma? Karma is defined as, in Hinduism and Buddhism, the sum of a person's actions in this and previous states of existence, viewed as deciding their fate in future existences. Growing up in a very non-religious home, karma wasn't discussed much growing up. When I got into my last 2 years of high school, I became a born-again Christian, and that's where things have started to get really interesting. The word karma to a Christian is like saying the word bomb on an airplane. They simply want nothing to do with it. But reincarnation, karma, and meditation all seem to just make sense to me. I was drawn to them, even as a Christian. I always just dismiss karma because God would never act in such a way, even though his character as portrayed in the Bible displays even stranger concepts or characteristics. Why would God hold somebody accountable for something in a past life? Christians just explain away past lives, even though it says in the book of Jeremiah, quote, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. I appointed you as a prophet to the nations." And in the book of Exodus, apparently God punishes the children of parents who sinned 3 or 4 generations prior. Quote, "You shall not bow down to them or worship them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing the children for the sins of the parents to the 3rd and 4th generations of those who hate me." End quote. Since I dismiss karma because of my religious affiliations, it was never something that I thought about. But now that I've grown emotionally and spiritually since then, karma is starting to make a lot of sense to me. So here are some examples of karma. Let's say I get angry at a loud car going by my house. This anger I'm displaying is just a manifestation of one of my 5 sense realities of my personality. The person dominated by their 5 sense reality constantly looks for their own power from sources outside, out there. Assuming that every thought, every interaction, every circumstance, every situation holds sacred energy, when you get angry, you are emitting into what Rupert Sheldrake calls the morphic field. Some call it consciousness. The other people call it Akashic Records, energy, or the Force, like Star Wars. You're emitting into your field of awareness a negative energy. Because everything must be balanced in the universe, something has to happen with this negative energy, right? When you yell at somebody, think of it as a disservice to all of mankind. That negative energy is put into the ether and can affect other people in harmful ways, at least possibly. Have you ever noticed the vibe of a place might feel off? There might be something creepy about a hotel room you're staying in or a house you're living in. You might come to find out later that somebody was killed there. I don't know how to measure that scientifically or prove any of this. I don't need scientific tools to tell me something my intuition already knows. Karma and the law of attraction. That negative energy that you just exuded must be balanced in some capacity. In terms of balance, not in other ways, but more on that later, we live in a world of dualism, right? There's yin yang, good bad, man woman, up down, right wrong, black white. You get the idea. So when people get upset and scream or yell at a car going by, that's making a lot of noise. We just created negative karma. Here's what I notice what happens in my life. I create more situations that are loud so that I can be presented with a choice to balance out that negative karma I created the first time around. We often don't think of every small detail of our lives as carrying with it energy and karma. Every interaction you have with every human being not just has the potential to create or destroy karma, but it's actually sacred. You create a sacred energy field between the person you're interacting with and you. It's a shared new entity that you have just created. So when we realize that every situation is a sacred opportunity, we start to see how this applies to the law of attraction, right? Because we lack awareness and live unconsciously, we strike out and get angry again when another car goes by. I'm just using loud cars here as an example. Feel free to use any example that pertains directly to you. Now let's just say every time we get upset with these loud cars, it costs us, say, 10 points of negative karma, right? If 10 loud cars go by in a week and we get mad at all 10 of them, then after 1 week we've accumulated 100 points of negative karma. So God, in His or her awesome grace and wisdom, will allow us to continually create more circumstances with more loud cars. Could God just wipe away all 100 items of negative karmic debt? Of course. Sure, God could do that. But wouldn't that make life less interesting? 7 billion people that never learn their lessons and get solutions handed to them without ever working for it? Doesn't really make for a fun place or world to live in, does it? God will graciously allow us to create more of the same karmic circumstances that will enable us to knock down those 100 units of karmic debt. As long as we live unconsciously with limited awareness of how every circumstance is sacred, we will continually build up karmic debt that must be balanced out. More karmic debt, more situations that allow you to accumulate karmic debt. Can you see the self-perpetuating cycle here? Maybe you're thinking at this point that you've accumulated millions of dollars in karmic debt, right? Some situations carry with them very small amounts of responsibility from a karmic debt perspective, so they're worth less than others. Bigger events require people to have more resources as a result of spiritual work they've done, so they might be worth more. So it's possible to quickly erase any karmic debt you've accumulated. The other thing to consider as well is having positive karmic impact. With every situation, our response can either have a negative impact on karma or a positive impact on karma. Wiping out negative karma. You can accumulate a positive karmic, quote, a cash flow, if you will. Why couldn't you use that positive karmic energy to pay off the karmic debt you've created for yourself? So how does one do that? Well, you'll have to consider that during your meditation times or consult your higher self through contemplation. Consider every event in your life, even your thoughts, to be karmic transactions like you were spending money. When one account goes down, the other account goes up. The asset sheet must always be balanced with karma in your life. One way I've found to avoid karmic debt is to find the situations that most commonly cause you to go into negative karma from a karmic perspective. In this example, we'll just use loud cars that go by our house again. We live at a 4-way stop. One street is a direct route to the local school, and the street that intersects is a direct route to the beach. As I'm typing these words, I hear the hum of mufflers and car engines stopping and starting as they drive by. Again, substitute my example for what angers you in your life. What I've been doing is creating a story that facilitates my healing and growth by going into the very thing that frustrates me. I will go and sit on the corner and pray for the people that go by in their cars. I'll tell myself a story that perhaps these people with noisy motorcycles were never heard in their life. Nobody cares what they have to say, right? Nobody wants to hear their opinions on topics. Nobody listens to them. They're not being heard. So what do? They create a situation where they will be heard no matter what by anyone and everyone every time they drive by. They'll, quote, make people hear them. That's a sad story, right? And you can take the story even further. What happened in their lives as children that make them feel like they were not being heard? Were they beaten? Were they abused? Why don't they have a voice? Why do they feel that nobody will listen to what they have to say? You see, when you begin creating stories about people, complete strangers I might add, it opens a door of compassion to that area of your heart that's been closed off for so long. We've closed off that section of our hearts by telling ourselves disempowering stories filled with labels and judgments. When you label somebody with a word that carries with it a generalized preconceived judgment, it doesn't allow them to be anything other than what you've defined them to be. For them, they can do no right because they've crossed the lines of your labels and judgments. They've sinned against you, and you deal with it by being angry with them, and even though you set them up for failure to begin with. For you, it's also constricting because it doesn't allow you to be flexible, creative, or compassionate. We humans just like to judge. We like to label. It's what we do. We like things to be all figured out. If it's figured out in my mind, nothing that anybody says or does will ever change that. So I can apply all my anger to that label and put that label on anybody who I feel transgresses my laws. But that doesn't serve us very well, does it? It doesn't allow for flexibility and growth. The more compartmentalized areas we have in our brain about how we think the world works and how people should be, the less of a chance of free-form energy between those two things to happen. We've created a mindset that won't allow for any cognitive dissonance, right? This allows us to live in a safe world full of fear, judgment, and negative karma. That's not a world I want to live in. But when you ask questions and use your own creativity to carefully build a story like the one I described above, it allows you to begin to have some compassion for strangers that are causing you to get angry. Maybe their mom or dad just died and that's why they're acting like that. Create a bunch of, quote, maybes that will serve you and allow you to open the door of compassion to them. When you begin to forgive and have compassion on people who are not just doing their best, who are just trying to do their best, they don't know they're acting in such ways. How horrible would it be to cause so much disturbance to others and not even know it? You actually begin to pay back some of that karmic debt. And that debt starts to become less and less. You're accumulating good karma on the positive side of your bank account now. It's just a transfer of pre-existing energy, right? When one goes up, the other one goes down. The less karmic debt that you have, the less you'll need to create situations in your life that will give you the ability to once again make the conscious choice of how to respond. You'll be able to attract good things in your life instead of negative experiences. I've always thought karma as just payback for acting bad, right? But when you see that it can almost be like a spiritual bank account attracting circumstances in your life that will create balance, you'll begin to play with it a bit and understand that ultimately you have control over that bank account. It's the accumulation of energy in that account that stimulates the need to create circumstances that will balance everything out. When we are balanced out, it means we've learned our lessons and have grown in some way as a result of learning those lessons. Because that's what life is all about, right? It's all about growth. I don't know about you, but I'm going to have story time with the guy who just drove by on his Harley-Davidson motorcycle. Do you want to read this article? You can do so at justinstellman.com/A